am at Dean Cemetery. This video, I think I'm going to call it something like Burke and Hare graves or something along those lines. That is a bit of a misdirection. If you know the story, you will know that there aren't graves for Burke and Hare. But I have found three graves in the cemetery which are connected to the story of Burke and Hare. So I'll just start briefly by just giving you a quick overview of the story in case you don't know, which I'm sure you probably do. So they were notorious murderers in Edinburgh. There is sometimes they're called grave robbers. They never robbed a grave. That is not true. That's not the case. But they were murderers who were tried, who were caught and were tried. I say that Hare actually turned state's evidence against Burke and got away with the crimes, whereas Burke was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging, which I will get to as well. Yeah, so Hare got away with it. He obviously couldn't stay in Edinburgh afterwards. He was going to get lynched. So he was driven out of town, dropped off, and said, yeah, my soul never come back. Thank you very much. So we don't know actually where he ended up or what he called himself or anything like that. He will have a grave somewhere, I expect. We just don't know where or what's written on it. And as for Burke, well, his skeleton is hanging in the Anatomy Museum uptown. But actually, this is one of the graves, but we're going to come to this one second. We're just going to continue up here to the first one, and we'll come back this way. Yeah, so Burke and Hare don't have graves. Well, Hare probably does, but we don't know where it is. And then the other two people who were tried in the trial, Helen McDougall, Burke's mistress, and Hare's wife, Mrs. Hare. Her name escapes me. We don't know what happened to them either. They weren't found guilty, but again, they had to leave town to avoid repercussions from the locals, and they're never seen or heard from again. So we don't know what happened to them either. And as for their victims, there's no graves for the victims because we don't know what happened to their bodies. That is something that I don't think. How can I put this? There has to have been a procedure at the anatomy school, what they did with the bodies after they'd finished with them. Cremation or mass grave, whatever it was, they must have some record of it somewhere, but that's my theory anyway. Right, we've come to grave number one. So this is Alexander Monroe III, and that's very important. It's the third one. His dad and his granddad also had the same name, but this Alexander Monroe did the autopsy on Burke. He worked at the anatomy school, and he was given the task of he was given the body after he'd been hung, and to do with what do you want? I believe he used it as a lesson, and he did some other things with it as well. Some of his skin was taken and made a book out of, and some of his blood was used to write the following. With this, let's start again. This is written with the blood of W.M. Burke, who was hanged at Edinburgh. The blood was taken from his head. So Alexander Monroe took the blood out of his head and decided to write with it. I'm not sure you get away with that these days, but back then, okay, so yeah. So Alexander Monroe, he was a lecturer. Lecturer at the anatomy school. One of his students was actually Charles Darwin of the evolution of species, theory of evolution fame. Darwin had said of him, his lectures were as dull as he was. And by all accounts, Alexander Monroe III was not very well kept man. He was quite scruffy and etc. etc. But anyway, yes, there's grave number one, the guy who did the autopsy on Burke. Okay, back along towards the pyramid, to the second grave. This is the grave of Henry Coburn. yeah, so this is Henry Coburn. He was a lawyer. He was the defence lawyer for Helen McDougall, who was Burke's mistress. He got her off on a not proven verdict. So for those of you outside Scotland, I think they're just about to change this law, or they have already, but there were 3 verdicts: guilty, not guilty, and not proven. And not proven was, you probably did it, but we don't have the evidence, or you didn't do it, and we don't have any evidence to say you didn't. So, yeah, she was gotten off on a not proven verdict. Yeah, and here he is, Henry Coburn, and his wife's here as well, and it looks like a few other family members. Big plot. So obviously, yeah, influential man. But yeah, the lawyer for Helen McDougall. Okay, heading towards the third and final grave in this video. I'll just give you an indication of where I am. If I spin back around this way, you can still see the pyramid. And just up this path is our final Burke and Hare related grave in this graveyard. There is another grave in town that I don't know about, which is, yeah, it's related to the story, but it's not a major player, if you like, which I do intend to do and film. But enough of that for the moment. We're just coming up to this grave here, and this is the final resting place of Lord Moncrieff. It's pretty hard to read. Luckily, there was a photo online that helped me find this. So this is Lord James Wellwood Moncrieff, the 9th Baronet. He was the lawyer for Burke. The most interesting thing about this is he took the case because he believed everybody should have a lawyer regardless of their guilt. So he clearly thought Burke did it, and the fact that he was found guilty, well, who knows? But anyway, he seemed like a pretty good kind of lawyer, really, because he was doing it not for the money, he was doing it for the humanitarian reasons, I guess you could say. But yeah, he was Burke's lawyer, Lord Moncrieff. Well, there we go. That's all the graves here. Like I say, there's one more in town, which I'll get to in another video. But yeah, there's some Burke and Hare related graves, if you like, I'm going to call it that. But yeah, anyway, bye.